The MiTE Chronicles. Day... crap. Right, I remember, I died. And of all things, I died just as it began to rain, which meant even sunrise wouldn't offer protection against any mobs that spawned overnight. I had just 120 seconds to ponder my fate in Bardo before reincarnation kicked in and hurled me back into corporeal hell. Best to savor every moment of assured non-destruction and let as much of the night pass as possible, I figured. Maybe God would give me a miss and forget to... Nope. He's never been a fan. Well, if I were to survive what remained of night in the jungle at spawn, my surest bet was to acquire as much height as possible. I pulled myself up by the nearest vine and dug a little hole in the top of a tree where I could drop a deuce and read a newspaper. Something about reincarnation always gets the bowels moving, doesn't it? Thankfully, morning was quickly upon me and desert was just footfalls away. It never rains in the desert, much to the chagrin of electronic alternative rock musician Moby, and I could at least dry my shoes. Before plunging headlong back into the storm, I resolved to not let a little thing like dying get in the way of a fruitful day's labor, and began collecting flowers. So long as I made it back to the murder hole by sunset, my items would be waiting for me. That is, unless a certain zombie bastard with Roninpawn blood still crusting beneath his fingernails were to steal my prized pumpkin from the pile. Oh, he'd ruined it! That was a blue ribbon gourd before he plunged his head through the bottom of it anyway. I swore then and there not to rest until I dispatched his every limb to a separate quarter of my domain, cauterizing the wounds so that he might live a helpless torso to see his... And then the rain stopped, and the sun came out, and my murderous desires were replaced by joyous optimism for a new day. Maybe he didn't have to die. He'd just taken the wrong path in life after all. He could be reformed, I was sure of it. Just needed a chance at a good, honest day's labor. And after all, I had said I could use a scarecrow for my pumpkin patch. I decided to communicate with him in the only language he knew. He said his name was Frank, and he agreed to tend to my gourd garden in exchange of the occasional brain, of which I was currently flush with stock thanks to some sheep who had no respect for a good pair of sneakers. My first employee, Frank! Do I need to file a W-2 or something? Just a bit beyond the pumpkin patch, I located what appeared to be a sprawling cave system with multiple points of surface access. While searching for an easy N, I nearly tripped over a bit of copper ore, the first I'd seen above ground in this seed. I knew there must be gravel waiting for me somewhere ahead, but running Frank through employee training had taken longer than anticipated, so I decided to return the next day. As anticipated, my goods and sundries were all present when I arrived home, save one prize-winning pumpkin, of course, and a fair bit of my XP I'd traded to a boatman for safe passage over the river Styx, but I was little worse for the wear. It was a fairly standard night, you know the routine. Dig gravel, kill zombie. Dig gravel, kill zombie. Dig gravel, and find your 12th flint chip. Hurrah! I celebrated raucously. Why, if Frank was still awake, I'm sure he'd have heard me from the pumpkin patch. Ah, the day was nigh, my labors rewarded. I could now craft a proper Flint Axe. Oh, is that you, Frank? Sorry I woke you. Won't happen again. Just Roninpawn crafting a Flint Axe over here. Seriously, my apologies, Frank. I didn't mean... Oh no! Frank, what are you doing? Did you take your pumpkin off? You silly fool! You'll burn alive out there! Listening to the sounds of Frank burn alive made me flinch. It was horrible, and also quite catchy. I started to tap my foot and hum along. Sorry, Frank. I can't resist the pun. You're fired. With axe in hand, I beelined it to the forest and started felling trees, all the while dreaming of the various uses I'd put this wood to when I returned home that evening. Now, the whole day wasn't just spent chopping trees, but what would it add to the story if I told you I'd milked a cow or poked my head in a pond looking for clay? Nothing, really. So why mention it? When I was home again at last, I inspected my dwelling and quickly realized I'd outgrown my studio apartment, and it was time to move up to a one-bedroom. With the wood I'd gathered, my first priority would be to resupply myself with wooden shovels. Second, I'd want a bed so that future trips through Bardo wouldn't leave me squatting atop a jungle tree until morning. The tree would probably appreciate it as well. And I'd do myself well to have another block of cheese. Oh, God. You know, this stuff's probably why I left that dollop of number 2 in the branches. Right, onto the renovations. I was coming up in the world, and what's fit for a pauper is not fit for a Roninpawn today. I pushed back the southern wall and pondered the security of my home. A single layer of grass does not a fortress ceiling make, and while my wood supplies were limited, my patience with the prospect of repeated deaths was more so. I made some half slabs and reinforced the ceiling, dug out a few blocks more, hung some more ceiling, installed my new twin mattress. Well, newish, second-hand's cheaper. Most of the stains looked non-biological. I was clean out of inventory space, and as loath as I was to spend so much of my wood on the comforts of home, there was simply nothing else for it. I'd need a proper chest. I'd also need something to eat. My God, did I skip supper? I've got a horrendous craving for a 3-meat pizza. 4 hours into watching it ferment. 3 bites and it's gone. So worth it. There, now, you see, a place for everything, and everything in its place. In its very overly specific, excruciatingly precise, obsessively compulsive place. I'm sorry. Oh, do excuse me, that'll be Samuel at the door. Invited him over for housewarming. I'm expecting he brought a gift. I listed at Amazon, and I'm hoping he got the salad tongs. It'll make it easier to pry his legs off and shove them down his throat, the little turncoat snitch. Right, I remember, I died, and of all the things I died just and of all the things I died, You're gonna laugh at that when you're listening back.